World War I was a violent and chaotic phenomenon that dragged nearly every nation in the Western world into a struggle for power that nearly tore them apart. Everyone expected the war to be over in the blink of an eye, but that was not the case. As the war raged on, nations searched for a new way to rally its citizens, gain soldiers, and demonize the enemy. One of the most effective ways of communication to the public was through something we know as propaganda. Propaganda is a biased way of using pictures and dialogue to influence and persuade the opinions of the public. Sometimes good, yet sometimes picturing different types of negative innuendos such as rape, relation to savage animals like gorillas and wild dogs, and common cruelties to women and children. They also have positive representations such as encouraging men to join the war, giving women a chance in assisting the war, and persuading people to grow more crops. Although they joined the war fairly late, the U.S. was still able to create a fair array of propaganda. One of the most well-known pieces of American advertisement from the World Wars is Uncle Sam. Although he didn't blow up in popularity until World War II, he was first used in World War I. Uncle Sam was used extensively by the American government to solicit young men into becoming soldiers. But Uncle Sam certainly wasn't the only piece of noteworthy American broadcasts. Another famous piece of American propaganda from the First World War depicts a soldier, a farmer, and a factory worker walking arm in arm. The message being everyone plays an important part in the war. Aside from rallying soldiers and a sense of patriotism, America also used propaganda to concentrate the country's frustrations on the enemy and to convince citizens to support the war in any way they could. In order to get the American people to fully hate the enemy, mainly the Germans, they were compared to vicious animals, brutes, and savages.
Although drafting propaganda wasn't necessary for Russia due to its size, they still used propaganda during the Great War to get citizens to buy war bonds and increase their incredibly low morale. In order to get citizens to help pay for the war effort, Russian Nicholas II released pamphlets advertising war bonds which were standardized at 5.5% per month. However, after the assassination of Nicholas, the loans lost all their value. Beginning at the start of the century, women saw an increasing amount of time in factories. Like in other countries, propaganda to depict the women in the workplace were produced and distributed. However, unlike their neighboring European nations, the amount of working Russian women compared to men didn't change. This was due to the fact that Russia had more than enough men to fight for them in the war. Due to inner turmoil the Russian people were going through at the time, there were a few instances where propaganda during World War I was aimed at certain members and groups of the Russian nation. One such example of this is the poster depicting Rasputin the puppet master. Rasputin was a mystic hired to heal one of the members of the Russian royal family, and although he was hated by the general population, he was allowed to stay because he was able to prove his worth, and the mother of the sick child was able to convince her husband that he should stay. Because of this, he was able to basically run the Russian foreign policy, and this caused much controversy. Germany in general had its propaganda aimed at boosting the morale in its own people. Some posters showed German soldiers fiercely and heroically fighting for their homeland. Oftentimes, these posters used the color red to signify the courage and loss made by German forces. Others showed fire to signify the intensity of the German army lifestyle. All of this was done to show that Germany had an army that was truly worth reckoning. Germany had to ensure that it had the momentum to end the war with a victory for the German Kaiser. One particular propaganda item that became synonymous with the German war machine was the Piccolobby helmet. The Piccolobby helmet was renowned for the spike placed on the top of the helmet, an unusual feature in a battle helmet. Although striking, this helmet was nothing more than a showpiece later in World War I, a showpiece that would again strike fear in its enemies in World War II.
Great Britain contributed a large amount of propaganda made in the war. The famous American "I Want You" for the U.S. Army endorsement with Uncle Sam was actually based on an earlier British propaganda poster named "Lord Kitchener Wants You." Many of Britain's propaganda focused on recruiting men for Her Majesty's Royal Army. Although Britain had a fearsome navy, their army was lacking compared to their counterparts. To show reason for Britain entering the war with its allies, they also produced publications showing the war's atrocities, specifically the atrocities committed by the German army. An example of this is the "What is the red rag is to the bull" poster. It depicts a German U-boat attacking a civilian ship without haste. Some would argue that Britain was the most successful at producing atrocity propaganda, as it became their signature during the war. Britain's ability to paint dastardly pictures of their enemies was vital in ensuring British morale was high during the lows of war. It gave the government a reason for being part of this bloody and long conflict. The British government knew that if the home front fell, it would be the end of the mighty British Empire. World War I was the first great total war, a war that had countries fully committed to fighting in it, a war that had nations as a whole investing on the outcome of this tragedy. Propaganda served an important role in World War I. It allowed men to be inspired to join the cause and inspired them to lead onward and serve with purpose. World War I propaganda also allowed countries opportunities to provide justification for entering such a bloody and costly war. It helped to showcase the atrocities of war itself, the gruesome scene of blood and mud, and the disgusting nature of trench warfare.